pod bay doors, please, Hal.
Are open. Thank you very much for joining us once again. I'm your host, Doug Heller, film critic and film historian of TalkMovieToMe.com, here, as always, with my co-presenter, Jerry Dean Roberts of ArmchairCinema.com, ArmchairOscars.com, and OverThinkingOscars.WordPress.com. How are you today, Jerry?
Doing well, and you'll be happy to know that we are co-presenters, but we're skipping the witty award show banter.
Don't count on that.
Before we
Today...
get started, I want to mention we do have a special announcement. We're now on Twitter.
Yay!
I wanted to mention that we're now at pod_bay, so you can find us there.
Well, that's great that you can catch all of our links when we go up, and all of that good stuff there. We might even be tweeting out from that from time to time. But today, we're doing a special episode. On a special episode of the Pod Bay Doors.
Very special episode.
We're going to be discussing the 9 Best Picture nominees for the 2017-2018 Oscars. How do you do that? I always go by the year that the movies were released and that they're honoring, but most of the time you see things that are when the awards are actually held, which is the next year. How do you describe it? 'Cause I always get annoyed with that.
I don't know. I always when I'm writing it, it gets confusing because it's like what year is the movie for? Is it it's for the year, but it's presented in the following year. I'm now doing a piece for my blog where I'm talking about the nominees for this year, but I have to call it 2018, so is it going to be confusing in 12 months so people look back on it and they think, oh, well, that's the nominees. Wait a minute, it says 2018. It's a little...
A lot. I've found that those okay, so it's the 2018 Oscars. Those are the Oscars that were held in 2018, not for 2018. But I tend to default to the year that is being awarded and not the year that the. Anyway, that was a little off track. I apologize about that. So,
No.
Jerry, you've got the list. Why don't you get us started?
Well, we're going to talk about the Best Picture nominees alphabetically. Just a little. There are 9 of these this year. The category is flexible. It usually goes to 10. I don't know why they didn't fill it with 10.
Because there were certainly enough to do that.
Right. And so we're going to do these alphabetically. And we're going to start with Call Me By Your Name. I saw this 2 weeks ago. And the first thought I had in my mind is, this is going to bore average filmgoers to death. Because you really have to know this director. It's Luca Guadagnino. And if you know his work, you know that he's not in a hurry to get anywhere. His films are slow. They're leisurely paced. He takes his time. And he does not give you what you expect.
What else has he directed?
He directed a movie called I Am Love with Tilda Swinton and A Bigger Splash. And they're all at this pace. They're all... it's you have to be patient with him. he's getting there. When you're watching your film, you know that he's getting to a place,
Mm-hmm.
and it's I personally I love it absolutely.
This is the first one of his that I've seen that I'm aware of, but I really loved this picture.
I did too.
I saw it maybe a week before you did, and it's it's measured, but it tells an excellent story about an American-ish kid in where are they? Italy,
They're northern Italy.
northern Italy, uh, who has a kind of a sexual awakening, but he's got a girlfriend and he starts uh, an emotional and physical relationship with his father's research intern,
Right. His
played
father
by
is
Army
a
Hammer.
his father is a professor of Greco-Roman architecture, and
And as
yeah, he's fun.
fascinating as that sounds, they don't really
Yeah.
go into a lot of
Oh, but when his dad
it.
talks about this, there is such a light in his eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like us talking about movies. It's amazing. Yeah, but he starts this relationship with this man, but it's not what you expect. There's a very slow meeting of the minds, and it's a little touchy because the kid is 17
Hmm.
and the older man, the kid's name is Elio, and the older man is named Oliver, and it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's a little sticky because of that. But he's very, very, very. The director is very, 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 very careful with this relationship.
Hmm.
There's sex in it, but there's no golden light thrusting.
Right.
When they have a sex scene, a lot of times it's very brief and it's behind closed doors.
Hmm.
There's one
It's
sex.
more implied than it is
It's more
shown.
implied than anything else. Yeah. Um, but it's very touching.
Hmm.
And they come together. They don't come together because of a sexual attraction. They come together because of a meeting of the minds.
Hmm.
Because there are a lot of conversations about music, about literature, about a lot of things, and it builds to this relationship.
Right. And it's just kind of fascinating where they first they become friends, and then uh, Elio thinks that he might have some kind of an attraction to Oliver, but he's not really sure. But then he kind of brings it up, and excuse me, finds out that Oliver's game. Meanwhile, Elio's sleeping with this girl. So he's not. It's not a gay coming out story. It's a following your heart kind of thing, not letting labels or uh, social conventions get in the way of how you feel about a person. More
It takes
about
place in 1983 when this
right.
was, today it would be a little. Today people would be more accepting of this. Back then
Right.
it was. The thing is, when it reaches its conclusion, I'm not going to give anything away, but when it reaches its conclusion, you sense that it doesn't matter that Oliver's a man.
Yeah.
You reach the conclusion of this. What you are drawing from it is that Elio will remember this relationship for the rest of his life,
Mhm.
and he will chase this relationship
Mhm.
for the rest of his life, trying to find a relationship, whether it be with a man or whether it be with a woman. He will try to find a relationship this meaningful,
Right.
and he will never find it.
No. It's kind of heartbreaking.
It
But
is, especially the
it's
last scene, which goes into the closing credits too.
yeah. But that's not really surprising considering that it was written by famed writer director James Ivory,
Mhm.
who did The Remains of the Day and Shadowlands, and
Oh,
like
there are Merchant Ivory touches all over this movie.
yeah, there are. He's in his 80s. If he happens to win, and it's looking like he probably will win for best adapted screenplay, he'll be the oldest person to have ever won an Oscar competitively.
Um,
Older than the
let's,
guy that wrote I don't remember. There was something a few years ago that an 81-year-old won for
yeah.
best adapted screenplay or best original screenplay, and he was the oldest at the time. And James Ivory is something like 86 years old or something.
I want to make sure we mention the actors because this kid is
Timothy
really, really
Chalamet.
good.
Yeah,
Timothy Chalamet is really, really good. He's in another one of the films we're going to
he
talk about in a
is.
little while. He's really good. Army Hammer is really good, and I've never really liked Army
I've
Hammer all
never
that
been
much.
a big fan of Army Hammer, but he was excellent in this, and I'm shocked that he wasn't nominated.
Yeah, and there's one other actor I really want to spotlight here, and he's also in another film that we'll talk about, and that's Michael Stuhlbarg.
He was amazing in this. The
He's
father.
amazing
Oh,
in everything.
yeah, he is. He is.
He's in every third movie I see,
Right.
and every time I see him, I know what I'm going to get. And he has a scene at the end of this movie that's absolutely beautiful.
It is.
A conversation with his son that is very frank, but is also very emotional.
Mm-hmm.
At which I'm straining not to give this away, but if I said it was a slow film, it is almost worth it to get to this moment.
Yeah,
The
it's
father just sits there and just the wisdom of a parent giving their blessing to a child
mm-hmm.
on the experiences that they're having.
Right.
It's beautiful. I wish he'd gotten a supporting actor nomination for
Yeah,
this.
they both should have probably gotten something for. I'm actually surprised that Timothy Chalamet is the only actor that
Yeah,
got nominated for this, and the director was unnominated, um,
yeah,
which lessens its chances uh, for Best Picture. Um, there are only what two Best Picture winners that have ever won that didn't have a Best Director nomination, and that's
right.
Grand Hotel and Argo. They were a little bit. They were kind of a what 60 years apart,
I believe
70 years apart, 80.
Driving Miss Daisy. He may have been nominated. I
Oh
don't know.
no, I don't
I'm
remember.
not sure.
But
We're fumbling on it.
there's only two or three.
Yeah.
It's
But call me,
it's not easy.
call me by your name. It's really beautiful.
Yes,
But like I
yes.
say, it requires your patience a little bit
Hmm.
because it takes away a lot of your expectations. A lot of these films take away a lot of your expectations.
Oh yeah.
That's why it's the best of the year.
Hmm.
Our next is actually two films because it is impossible to talk about one without talking about the other, and that is because they tell two sides of the same story. That is The Darkest Hour and Dunkirk,
Yes.
and
Both were really good. I liked
both
Dunkirk
really
maybe
good.
a little bit more, but
I'm actually the opposite. Both tell the story of the evacuation of Dunkirk in 1940, and but one tells the story in the Hall of Power, the Halls of Power, in Parliament, and the other tells the story of the actual evacuation.
right.
So you could literally splice these films together.
I actually watched them back to back.
I did too. Darkest Hour, I think, is personally for me. I think Darkest Hour is better because it's dealing with Winston Churchill trying to. He's been seated in as prime minister after Neville Chamberlain was deposed after Hitler refused to honor the Munich Agreement.
Hmm.
And Churchill realizes what Hitler's all about.
Hmm.
And
He seems to be the only one.
he seems to be the only one. Everyone else at this moment firmly believes that Hitler can still be um, Hitler can still agree to terms,
Mm-hmm.
and they
And
want to do
reason
it
with.
peaceably.
Right. Well,
And Churchill's just like,
Neville Chamberlain was a Nazi appeaser anyway. Uh,
yeah, very
but
much so.
the I it should be worth noting the director of this, Joe Wright, also unnominated. Um,
Mhm.
this is not the first time that he's tackled the subject of Dunkirk.
Right.
There was a remarkable shot. I think what solidified my love of atonement was when they got down to the beach and that huge arcing kind of steady cam crane shot that was just like a point of view look around the island. Uh, I think in the first night that they got down to the beach in Dunkirk, uh, I already was loving Atonement, and then that just kind of set it over the edge for me.
Yeah.
That made me want to pay attention to Joe Wright.
Well, Gary Oldman. I think Gary Oldman's gonna win the Oscar for this.
I think he is too.
He because one thing about this movie that really surprised me is there's no glorifying of Churchill in this. They don't deify him at all.
No, in fact,
He,
they deride him quite a bit.
yeah, very much. He does not know what to do half the time,
Right.
and there are tight close-ups on his face where he is fumbling for an answer,
Mm-hmm.
and it's mostly due to the fact that the people around him don't get it and are
Mm-hmm.
not willing to help him. There is a scene in this movie that is devastating where he, at a moment of crisis, retreats into a closet
Mm-hmm.
and calls FDR
Mm-hmm.
to ask him for help. And FDR is in an isolationist state of mind. He will not get involved. This is
Right.
1940, before
Right.
Pearl Harbor. And FDR just blows him off.
Yeah. That was sad.
That was really sad and really tragic. And the look on Churchill's face, like, are you out of your mind? It's just, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah. I mean, and the other thing I want to talk about to go hand in hand with Oldman's performance, um, is the makeup
Yes, very much
people.
so.
I mean, if you didn't know it was Gary Oldman, you wouldn't know it was Gary Oldman. He does
Right.
so many things with his voice to disguise his Oldman-esque uh, voice. And first of all, he gets to talk in his natural English accent, which is not something that most people are familiar with, even after Harry Potter.
Right.
He was in it so little, um, but he also puts on the Churchill voice, which is a very distinctive voice. Only a couple of times does his Gary Oldman voice come out when he's yelling. And, and the makeup, Gary Oldman is a skinny man. Gary Oldman is a
A
thin,
chameleon.
yeah. And but in this, he's got the padding, he's got the makeup on, and he looks like he's the 250, 300 pound Winston Churchill walking around with massive cigars and brandy and champagne. Uh, it's it's impressive. It's impressive. I
But isn't it? I'm sorry.
I was I was gonna say I'm kind of personally against him winning for only one for not because I think someone else is more deserving in their performances this year, but in light of everything that's going on in the hashtag Me Too movement and everything, it should be brought up that Gary Oldman is an arrested wife beater and was very violent with one of his wives back in the early 90s. He had the police call on him. He it makes me uneasy
Yeah,
that
I
they're
understand
I'm I think that they should if if the allegations against James Franco were enough to not get him a nomination for the Disaster Artist, which I'm in support of them not rewarding him. I didn't want Casey Affleck to win last year. Not just because I wasn't a huge fan of Manchester by the Sea, but because he had had all these allegations of sexual assault and harassment. Uh, I don't think we should be rewarding the the people who do this, even if it's been a long time. I don't think that Mel Gibson should have been nominated last year for Hacksaw Ridge. Hacksaw Ridge was a good picture. It wasn't a great picture, and he's a misogynistic anti-Semite. So we don't. We shouldn't be. We shouldn't forget those things.
I think that here's where it comes down with Gary Oldman. If he wins this Oscar, which I think he will,
Hmm.
it will be because this, and this is not to say anything negative against this performance, it will be because this performance is basically kind of Oscar standard issue.
Right, and he's been a bridesmaid and never a bride quite a few
But,
times.
but he's one of the great character actors
Hmm.
that we have. This is a man who has played Dracula, Lee Harvey Oswald, Sid Vicious, Commissioner Gordon. You know, nobody has a resume like this man.
No, he what you said before was exactly right. He's a chameleon. He can
Mm-hmm.
show up and you don't realize it's him right away.
Yeah.
Um, because he can disappear into a role. Not as effectively as Daniel Day-Lewis, but close,
Okay.
which we'll talk about him.
Um, as far as the allegations go, um, I have other people that I would like to win, not because of the allegations. It does trouble me.
Hmm.
I like Gary Oldman as an actor.
Hmm.
I would like to have seen him win for one of those other roles, but
Yes.
this
Yeah.
one's fine. This one's fine. If he wins, I won't complain, and I will understand why. It won't feel
Hmm.
like I know I'm sounding like a backhanded compliment. I'm as troubled by this as you, but I'm if he wins, I will understand why.
Right, and if and it's at least it's a dynamic performance.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like the makeup Oscar that Denzel Washington's Training Day Oscar was, which
This,
again, and Whoopi Goldberg's Ghost
yeah,
Oscar, she should have won for The Color Purple. He should have won for Malcolm X.
yeah.
But then they were like, well, we should have given them for these, so
If
we're gonna give them the Oscar, but not for the one that they deserve.
yeah.
The makeup
Well, and the
Oscar
other
is
thing is, well, the other thing is that um, he is the movie.
oh, up one side and down the other. I
Dunkirk, on the other hand, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Dunkirk, on the other hand, Dunkirk is a sight and sound experience.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of personality there. It could almost have been a silent film,
Yeah, yeah.
and I feel like it's a good movie. I wouldn't have nominated it for Best Picture because I can't really. I feel like Darkest Hour and Dunkirk are a package deal. You can't have one. You can't nominate one without the other. And I feel like maybe that's why it's here. It's two different movies by two different directors from two different studios. Darkest Hour is by Focus Features, and this is by Warner Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And um, like I say, this is a sight and sound, experience.
Don't,
There's not a lot of human personality here.
there's not, except for Mark Rylance, who
Yeah,
makes every character he plays humanistic to the nth degree.
and let me tell you something. Ever since I saw the trailer for this a year ago, every time somebody mentions the title, I'm like, Dunkirk.
Yeah, yeah.
I have to say it like he does. Dunkirk.
Yeah, I mean, I, he's wonderful, and uh, I think that Cillian Murphy is also quite good as the shell shocked pilot that gets shot down. Um, there are a
I
lot
like
of
I like Thomas
sequences.
Hardy's kind of the work, kind of the role that you would have seen in the 1940s in an American film,
Hmm.
so the hero pilot.
Yeah, 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 yeah. There's a lot of elements that make up Dunkirk that I think justify it being in the Best Picture category. It's more moments that culminate into an experience,
Yeah,
which is really, I mean, that is another nature of filmmaking. This isn't a regular war picture.
right.
It's not a lot of back and forth fighting. It's not Saving Private Ryan with an agenda. It's not the Thin Red Line with an anti-war escapism, escaping from the war agenda.
It's not
It's
a
not.
message here.
Right, right. It's just this is what was going on. These are episodes like when the guys hide in that boat and the Germans start using it for target practice.
Mhm.
Like they think they're getting shot at and they are, but the Germans don't know that they're in the boat.
And by the way, you never see the Nazis.
Right. No, never.
They're
And
just this cloudy presence.
right. And it's you definitely could um recut this in Darkest Hour to have um the parts where Churchill's talking and everything, and then cut to the stuff that's happening in Dunkirk, because there's enough there that if they wanted to uh, cut to Dunkirk, uh, they could cut to this movie and then cut back and then kind of make it one long multi-studio effort.
Right.
Directed by Joe Wright and Christopher Nolan.
If these were made in the '70s, somebody would have cut these together.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, I'm actually
Um,
impressed that the internet hasn't done that yet.
well, speaking of impressive, let's move on to our next film, which has got to be the goofiest film I think has ever been nominated for Best Picture. It's called Get Out.
I love this movie. I love this movie. I am this is my kind of champion cause. I'm a huge fan of my favorite movie of the year is Shape of Water, but I am championing this movie up one side and down the other. I want Jordan Peele to be the first black person to win Best Director Oscar. I I I want I'm this the fact that this is nominated in what is it, four categories or more?
Yeah,
Four
top
categories,
category.
five categories, and one of them is Best Picture. it's
Yeah, top
is
category.
remarkable because this was released in March,
Mhm.
and this stayed in the conversation. Uh, didn't it? It won Best Picture for the Online Film Critics Society, yeah.
Yeah,
And I mean, it's impressive that it stayed in the conversation, and it's impressive that not many first-time directors get a Best Director nomination. It's kind of rare.
this year it
Um,
happened twice.
yeah. So
I saw this last March. Maybe I saw it. I saw it a little late. And like Dunkirk, I'm struggling to remember a great deal about it because I didn't see it again. But
uh,
most of it is so fresh in my mind, though.
I've seen it two and a half times. My wife and I saw it in the theater. Then we bought the Blu-ray, and then when my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were visiting over New Year's, we put it on for them, and or my wife put it on for them, and I came home about halfway through and watched the rest of it. So,
It's so um, how do I what's the word I'm looking? It's a movie that almost requires you to watch it cold. Because what he's done, what has Jordan Peele has basically done, is he has turned and he has turned Guess Who's Coming to Dinner into a horror film.
Basically, yeah, he's captured uh, white people. If you've ever been in a situation where there's like you're in a large social gathering and there is only one or two black people there, this movie lets you know how they feel there.
Oh, I love the older white folks in this movie. They remind me of those affluent, older affluent white people who do not associate with black people, not on purpose. They just don't. And when they meet someone who's black, they try to find some
Some
avenue, even though they don't have one.
weird commonality between of culture or something. Like
You know who I really like?
I
That
like
Eddie
this
Murphy.
actor. Yeah. Exactly, exactly. And the Bradley Whitford character. You know, I would have voted for Obama for a third term if I could have.
Yeah,
And it's like just reaching. Like I know the names of black people. See, I am relatable to you. It's like
yeah, I'm hip.
no. Don't do this if you're a white person talking to a black person. They don't care, and it doesn't make you seem not
Right.
racist. Because let's just
Basically when you get into this story, it's constructed beautifully because
mm,
you don't know anything. You know only what this kid knows, and he's and I would love to ask Jordan Peele about this actor because I'm sure he picked him because he was right for the role. But I noticed, and I was talking to someone about this yesterday. Not only did he choose an actor who was black, but his I noticed his skin is very black.
mm-hmm,
Is that he did not choose a light skinned actor.
right.
So the point is made,
Mm-hmm,
and it's right there.
mm-hmm.
And one thing about him, and I cannot pronounce the actor's name. I'm sorry,
Daniel Kaluuya.
Kaluuya. Okay, he's a very expressive actor
Mm-hmm.
because there are a lot of scenes in this movie that require him um, just to respond with a
Oh,
look.
his facial expressions and just the way that he he earned his nomination.
He
Uh,
did.
all the way through. I would love to see him win. I don't think he's going to, obviously, because uh, Gary Oldman's probably going to take it. But again, he's my outside chance. Uh, I would love to see this movie win as much as it can because the screenplay is when you get to the reveal about what they're doing,
It's
it's
ridiculous.
it's a little it is kind of ridiculous, but on the same page within the universe that we are watching that this movie takes place in, it's not outlandish,
No,
and uh, it's horrifying.
it is.
Um, the 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 things that you see about the sunken place online, that is a terrifying concept, and the
The movie is a spiral.
it is, and it's so. I mean, it's terrifying. The whole movie is terrifying. I will never forgive the Golden Globes for nominating it as a comedy because it is not. I mean, granted, they're a, a, a bunch of white Europeans that don't understand the race relations over here. Granted, they're still pretty racist over there, but the relations over here are much different than they are in Europe, and this is one of those uncommon, uniquely American pictures in a increasingly globalized film market.
But what it is essentially, it is centered. Jordan Peele has created a satire on racism wrapped up in a horror film.
Yeah.
Sociologists will spend decades writing about this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could break it apart, and
I
it deserves to be broken apart.
I already know of at least one person who teaches it in film classes
Yeah.
already within the year that it came out. Like it's an important picture. It's a mind bender, and it's when you think Jordan Peele, you of course think Key and Peele from
Yeah.
Comedy Central or the wonderfully wacky Keanu that they
Oh,
that
I love
they
that movie.
that was so
He
good.
brings a lot of his comedy to this film
He does, but he twists it
because it
so that
reminded me.
it's funny and scary. There's parts that if you look at it on the surface, it's funny, but if you look a little bit underneath it, it's really nice.
It's almost like he wanted to um, twist a weird variation on that old Saturday Night Live bit where Eddie Murphy pretends to be a white
Yeah.
man
Yeah.
and he goes around to see what it's like, quote unquote, in white world. And he finds out that it's it's much more accommodating
Yeah.
just when black people are not around. It's kind of like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I have a problem with this movie, if I have one problem with this movie, it is that Jordan Peele has come up with such a brilliant mind bender um, that he wraps it all up, but ultimately, in my mind, does not know how to get out of it.
Mm.
No pun intended.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, when you get down to the third act and the cork is the bottle is uncorked, it's almost in the last 10 minutes like he didn't know where to go because it doesn't come to a solid conclusion. It kind of peters out. Without giving too much away, it was just, and I think that was an accommodation because he had come up with another ending,
Yes.
and the one he used feels more accommodating to a horror trope.
Mm-hmm.
It does really have a slasher ending,
Mm-hmm.
but when I came to the end, I was hoping there was one more step, one more something,
Right.
and it just kind of withered out.
Hmm. See, I loved it up one side and down the other. I hear what you're saying and I understand what you're saying about the ending. I don't share that opinion, um, but I can see where that's coming from. Um, but this kind of follows in like the kind of the great kind of body horror movies of like uh,
Cronenberg,
the huh
like Cronenberg or Invasion of the Body
Cronenberg
Snatchers.
or Eyes Without a Face, Georges Franju's 1958 or 9 French picture, or The Face of Another, the Takahashi. No, I'm gonna do this wrong. Now I have to look it up.
Yeah,
But Hiroshi Takagahari.
yeah.
That's a very difficult name, but it was from the early '60s. Uh, Teshigahari, I think his name is.
Everybody
But
in this movie is great,
yes,
but I want to mention one actor, and I do not know his name. Forgive me. But it's the actor who plays his TSA buddy. Is so funny because he's while he's trapped at this house, his TSA buddy keeps calling him and rambling about white people and sex slaves, and
yeah,
it's the funniest performance I've seen in a long time. It is great. I
it's
just wanted to
wonderful.
mention I cannot I do not know his name.
Laurel Howery.
Yeah, Laurel Howard. He was so great in this movie. I think he just added another dimension. Just him being in this, his little cutaways are just great.
He's wonderful in this, and he grounds the picture. He kind of brings it out a little bit so that you get a little bit of a breather.
Yeah,
Um,
Because
which
it
is
is a wind-up horror film.
yeah, it is. It is. Uh, I was right. Hiroshi Teshigahara, Face
Okay,
of Another. Um,
that's your
these
recommendation for this week.
that's yeah. Excellent picture. He's the same director that did Woman in the Dunes.
Yeah, that's a good movie.
Yeah,
That's a good movie.
same director.
Well, we're moving from affluent whites to poor whites. Our next film is Lady Bird.
This was so good.
This is the economic flip side of Call Me by Your Name.
Yeah,
Uh, if the
which also has Timothy Chalamet in it.
Yeah, also has Timothy Chalamet, not in as large a part, but
No,
he's um,
still a kind of an important part.
still kind of an important part. Basically, this is as much of a coming of age story as it could possibly be. I mean, up one side and down the other. It is about a difficult 17-year-old who is looking at college, um, who is always battling her mother, and the family is struggling because the mother works as a therapist, and the father's out of work, and she wants to go to an East Coast college, and they keep telling her you can't afford that. And it's also spliced in with the adventures that she's having, basically as a normal kid.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
One of my favorite lines is, "What's your name?" And she says it's Lady Bird, and she goes, "What's your given name?" She goes, "That is my given name. I gave it to myself."
she's difficult.
She played wonderfully by Academy Award nominated actress Charisse Ronan. Um, this is not her first Oscar nomination, is it?
The third
Yeah, wasn't she? She was up for Atonement and Brooklyn, right?
in Brooklyn, yes, but she hasn't
Brooklyn
won
was a
yet.
sweet movie.
But as normal a 17-year-old as you can find. And having said that, through the whole movie, I kept wanting to slap the hell out of this kid. She's disrespectful. She's now this is not like 13 or anything, where she's just a bad girl, but uh,
She's acting out because
she's acting out.
she's trying to find herself. It's the same feeling that you get when you watch Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix and you just want to smack Harry like every 5 minutes.
Yeah,
Every time he opens his mouth, he's being a little brat. Um,
she's difficult. She's trying to find. She's not really part of anything. She doesn't really care about much. She just wants what she wants. She joins the is it the theater group
hmm
just because.
hmm
She doesn't have a passion for theater. She just joins it because. She doesn't really have any extracurricular activities,
All right.
and she really just wants to hang out and do what she wants to do. She's a normal kid.
hmm
She does things like she throws over her best friend
Yeah.
for the more popular kid, and it creates a rift in their friendship briefly, very briefly. And she's always but the center of the film is that she's always battling with her mother.
hmm
Her
Wonderfully
mother,
played by Laurie Metcalf.
wonderfully played by
Oh.
Laurie Metcalf, who got her first Oscar nomination for this.
hmm
And Laurie Metcalf is always Laurie Metcalf. It's the same
Yeah.
character in everything, but it's a great character.
Yeah, I mean, going all the way back to Roseanne when she was the sister Jackie. I mean, this one at least she's a more mature version of Jackie.
Right.
but
It's the same character she played on Roseanne. It's the same character she played on The Big Bang Theory, and it's the same character she plays here. Except here, I think it's given a lot more weight
hmm
because she's dealing with um, her husband has her husband is was let go from his job because he has depression. Because he
hmm
suffers from depression,
hmm
and the family is sort of hemorrhaging from the financial debt and financial burdens. And she wants to go to an East Coast college, and she keeps telling her we can't afford it.
And they're in what, Sacramento?
Yeah, they're in Sacramento, and she keeps wanting to break away from that. which is reasonable, but it's just it's reasonable, but it's not feasible
Right, right, right.
economically. And this is the most how do I say this? It's a very personal statement. This is semi-autobiographical. It is
Hmm.
directed by Greta Gerwig,
And
who
written by.
and written by. If you've ever seen her, she's a wonderful actor.
Yeah, she is.
And but I really
Frances
like
Ha, Mistress
Frances Ha.
America.
Right, she was in Greenberg.
Hmm.
Um, but it's uh, I liked it a lot. I didn't find it extraordinary, but I did like it a lot.
I kind of fell in love with it. It's not revolutionary,
No, that's what I meant to say. It's not
but
revolutionary.
it is still a really well made, well acted, sweet movie that's not too saccharine. That really gets a lot of things right.
It doesn't
It's
paint the character like an angel.
right, and it's not your normal coming of age story. It tells about follies and foibles, and it's not, it's not four guys trying to get laid at prom. It's a girl who's just trying to find out who she is.
Um,
Much in the Juno vein.
right. I love Juno.
Yeah, me too.
Um, Saoirse Ronan is great because she does not play a likable character.
Right.
I love Laurie Metcalf, as I said before, but there's one performance in this movie that has just delighted me beyond words, and that is an actress by the name of Beanie Feldstein, who plays Lady Bird's best friend, Julie.
Mm-hmm.
She has such a bubbly personality. She's a girl who is, um, you can tell by looking at her, she seems to always be a follower.
Mm-hmm.
She's easily hurt because there is a moment when Lady Bird breaks her heart,
Mm-hmm.
and she's a very expressive actress. She's a very funny actress. She is the sister of Jonah Hill,
Oh, okay.
and but when I watched the film, she was the one that I came away with. It was like because she was the one I didn't expect
Mm-hmm.
because she's so funny.
Yeah, she is.
And but I've never seen her. I've never heard of her. But this was a nice little introduction to her. If I have one problem with this film, it is the same problem that I had with Get Out. The end of this movie, without giving it away, is sort of left floating. There is a conflict in the film that is left unresolved. That the last scene in the film, the movie, to me, didn't come in for a landing. It sort of left it a little bit in the air. It's a little thing, but it's like it felt more like a season finale than it did the closing to the movie.
See, for me, I think that uh, makes it more real, because when you come to the end of a certain part in your life or a certain instance, not everything gets wrapped up. So, if there's a conflict that's still left unresolved, you know that she's still working toward finding herself and being, finding her thing. And it's it's just I usually with something like this, I like it when it's not tied up in a nice little bow.
If it had been with a friend, I think I could understand it a little better.
Hmm.
Well, I'll just say it. It's a conflict. It's a conflict with her mother that does not end up with a. The conflict is left unresolved. It's left without a conversation, and it just it's. I know it sounds like I'm picking at it, but it's just when I left the theater, I kept thinking about it. because I know she's moving on to another part of her life, but to me it was left hanging.
Yeah, I mean, but uh, when you have a deep conflict with one of your parents, that tends to continue until you're in your early 20s
Mm,
to mid 20s, and we don't get to see that part of her life.
yeah,
When she finally realizes that she doesn't know everything. um, there's an old saying that when you're little, your parents are great and they know everything. When you're a teenager, you know everything and your parents know nothing. And when you're in your early 20s, you apologize and realize that your parents were right all
yeah. Maybe my parents
along.
weren't as dumb as I thought they were.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So we get that middle part where she
Yeah,
knows everything and her parents know nothing as far as she's concerned, and that's all we get.
kind of has to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I see it. It's just it. When I was walking out of the theater, it was like the air had been left out of like the movie didn't let the air out. But anyway, that's my problem. People see it differently, but we're gonna move on to the next one, which is my favorite film of all of these, and that is Phantom Thread.
It was so good.
It was so great.
I
If
just
you're
watched this
going
the
to
other
have
night. Oh man.
if you're gonna have a mixed bag of Best Picture nominees, you have to have P.T. Anderson in there. I mean, this movie, it's how do I describe it?
Yeah, you
It
go ahead.
looks it looks so almost like a Merchant Ivory film for such a long time that I sat there waiting for it to become a P.T. Anderson movie. I'm like, okay, when is this gonna turn into one of his movies? And it does,
Oh, very much so.
about halfway through. Played in what I hope is not Daniel Day Lewis's last performance.
Oh, I don't want to lose him.
I don't want to lose him because every time I see a movie with this guy, he's amazing. What magic does he have?
I
He
think
does not make him.
a few years ago somebody said that they should just reform the Oscar in the shape of Daniel Day-Lewis's face.
You know what? I would agree with that. Every he comes out every couple of years with a movie, and every couple of years that he comes out, he's marvelous.
Mm-hmm.
He is. He's marvelous. And here he's playing this Reynolds Woodcock.
Yeah,
This
that's a handle.
that's a hand that's a label name. That's the name you see on labels and on buildings.
Yeah.
And
It's like that's not a name you're
he
born with. That's a name that you create.
that's the name that's the name you're cursed with,
Yeah.
especially if you're in school. Um, but he plays this fashion designer in the 1950s whose whole life is absolutely has a complete and total order to it.
And not only does it have an order, it's structured around his likes and dislikes. Everyone in his orbit caters to him to make him comfortable so as not to interrupt the artistic uh, flow of his work. Like everything is centered around him.
For fear of being dismissed.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Because
if
he
you,
is he is a harsh person.
yeah, you see him at the beginning of the movie, and he's combing his hair, and he's picking out his suits, he's polishing his shoes. He's everything is just 1, 2, 3, ABC. It is a textbook of obsessive compulsive disorder.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when he sits down to breakfast, he has his breakfast, he has his sketchbook, his books. The lady that he's seeing is on his left, and his sister is seated on his right. No one says anything.
Yeah.
Everything is to be exactly as it is.
Mm-hmm.
And if the person that he's seeing, or the person that I guess you'd say he has affections for, um,
I wouldn't go that far.
yeah,
I think
in
they're
his own way, I
usually
guess.
like they're his models and muses. Like he patterns his clothes off of their what looks good on them.
Mhm.
But um, then he gets tired of them and he shows them out.
This girl that is at the very beginning of the movie, she says something that he doesn't like, and he dismisses her.
Hmm.
She's
Yeah,
gone.
like I can't start my day with a confrontation. I just don't have time.
Right.
And then this the sister who is basically his Pepper Potts uh, says, "Do you want me to get rid of her?" And he's like, "Yeah." And so
Yeah.
she orchestrates the moving out, so that he doesn't even have to be bothered with a goodbye or seeing her leave or anything to that effect. It's 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 very harsh. It's very cruel. It's very selfish,
Mhm.
which is Reynolds would cut it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Until
His sister Cyril, she got Leslie Manville got an Oscar nomination for this
Mhm.
as well. She's very good because she's really at the beginning of the movie. I did not know that she was his sister. I thought she was the secretary.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out what was going on there either.
Um,
I thought that maybe it
she
was his wife and they had a very open relationship because of his artistic tendencies that his lover moved in with them too. It took me a long time to figure out she was his sister.
she accommodates his needs,
She enables him. She doesn't
but
she doesn't merely accommodate.
she does not wither from him,
Right.
because there's a moment when she says, "Don't test me, or I will put you on the floor."
Mhm.
So you get the feeling that she's willing to play this role, but she's not going to be chained to it.
Mhm.
I'm not going to be one of the girls that you bring in this house. The young lady that he brings into the house, what is her name? Her name is Alma,
Mhm.
and she's a waitress. And he brings her in because he likes her shape. Um, but she does not have a normal body shape, a typical body shape, but she has whatever it is he's trying to fit
Mhm.
into whatever fashion he's doing. Basically, the women that he uses, women are used as living dress dummies,
Mhm.
effectively.
Pretty much.
And he brings her in, treats her like he treats everybody else. Um, don't displease me or I will dismiss you, that kind of thing.
But man, does she push back.
She pushes back, but it's not before a lot of conflict
Right.
that she tries to bring to him something new.
Mhm.
And this is a man whose every fiber of his being is resistant to the new
Yeah,
that he
she's
does not create.
she wants to appreciate and love him in her own way and not his way. And that is very disruptive. And she uses that to her advantage.
And he has some stern facial expressions.
Mhm.
Daniel Day Lewis is a very expressive actor. He has some facial expressions when she breaks. She tries to make him dinner at one point, and he's looking up at her, and she's standing at the top of the stairs. I thought he was going to kill her.
He had that Daniel Plainview look in his eye.
Yeah, he did. He did. And but but that doesn't work. And then she tries something else, which I'm not going to give away, but she tries something else. That's when it becomes the P.T. Anderson movie,
Yeah. Oh yeah. 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 Yeah.
because it starts to get weird.
It gets real weird.
And
And the ending is just bizarre as all get out. Like,
effectively, it becomes a situation at which she puts him in a position where he needs her. And
Okay, this is
I'm trying not to give it away, but I'll just
there's
say that it comes to an ending that I was shaking my head, going,
it
"This is
was a
kind of
very
brilliant."
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, the ending was brilliant. It was bizarre. It was very Paul Thomas Anderson, frogs falling from the sky. Uh,
No frogs falling from the sky, but
well, no, but like similar to the frogs falling from the sky at the end of Magnolia, and you know, you're a star, you're a star, you're a big bright shining star.
leaves you. I wrote my review and I said it leaves you with an ending that basically, if you're willing to go along with it, you just simply say, you know what, to each his own. It's become sort of almost a weird version of a cat and mouse game.
Mm-hmm.
And it is very, very strange. And it's, again, like Get Out, you could write, a sociologist could write, a study on this film.
Mm-hmm. A
Because this,
psychologist would have a pretty good time, pretty fun
yeah,
time of it too.
yeah,
There's a
yeah.
doctoral thesis in here somewhere.
I think you could do that with all of these films,
Yeah.
actually. Like you could write, it just, when I got to the end of this film and I'm walking out of the theater and I'm driving home, I am trying to work out what I just saw.
Yeah.
And it was a long drive home, so I had a lot to think about. This was playing this and Lady Bird were playing at two different theaters for one showing per day. And the times kept moving around. So between this and my work schedule, I had to just kind of catch it when I could. So I ended up like on a Wednesday night at a 10:30 show.
Oh gosh.
So I
And
arrived at the
this
end of
is a solid 130 minutes too.
I arrived at the end of this movie somewhere around 12:30, maybe 1 o'clock in the morning. So my brain was already tired, and I'd already worked a full day. And when I got to the end of this movie, I was like, you know what, this is kind of brilliant. But yeah, I don't think Daniel Day Lewis will win the Best Actor for this
He
because of
should
Gary.
if it's really his last movie, which who knows? Because I think Lincoln was supposed to be his last movie, and uh,
So probably There Will Be
there
Blood.
would be blood, and then then he wrote and directed and starred in his own movie, which was The Ballad of Jack and Rose, like in 2008 or nine, and then he said that he wasn't going to go back to movies after that, and then he he did Lincoln, and then he did this. So who knows? He'll either go back to cobbling or he'll do another movie.
I think Lincoln was easy for the Academy to decide on.
Oh sure.
I think Reynolds Woodcock is a little harder to get to for them.
Well, so was Daniel Plainview, which
Daniel
surprised
Plainview
me.
was a little more boisterous though.
Yeah, that's true. I drink your milkshake.
God, and he uses his natural voice for this.
He does, which is not something that I'm used to hearing.
Yeah, again
Just
another
like,
chameleon.
yeah, yeah, the way that he can manipulate his voice from the 19th century Midwestern in Lincoln,
Mm.
and the turn of the century oil man that was so influenced by John Huston that I'm surprised he didn't thank him in his
Yeah,
speech. Uh, to, I mean, anything going down the road to My Left Foot and
Gangs of New York.
Gangs of New York, uh, 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 The Age of Innocence,
Mm-hmm.
and it's he's one of the best, if not the best actor working today, possibly even in the history of film. He's definitely in like the top five. Uh,
I hope this isn't the last one
Me
because I
too.
get excited when I hear he's doing another
Yeah,
film.
me too. Especially when he's paired with Paul Thomas Anderson.
Oh yeah, yeah. But this one we're struggling not to talk about it too much because it's
Yeah.
I haven't given anything away really except to
Hmm.
say that it does turn on its head. It's a brilliant film. I love it. This is my favorite of the nominees.
It's an excellent film. If if this were to somehow pull out a dark horse win, I would not be upset. It
I
won't,
wouldn't.
but I wouldn't complain. It's definitely an incredible picture.
And we are going now from my favorite among the nominees to my least favorite among the nominees, and
Which
this
hurt
really breaks
which
my heart
hurts you so much, yeah.
because this is made by my favorite. This is The Post, and it is directed by my favorite American filmmaker, my favorite living filmmaker. I'll just say it because Spielberg rarely ever lets me down. Now I won't say that he completely let me down. This is not a The Post is not a bad film.
No. It's a very good, it's a very entertaining film. Um, but there's something missing.
Unremarkable about
Yeah, I mean it tells a great story. It
it.
has a lot of energy. Uh, Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep give great performances. So does Bob Odenkirk. So does David Cross, and uh, um, who
So
plays
did
Mac?
everybody.
Yeah,
Even Michael
yeah,
Stuhlbarg is in this.
yeah. I mean, everybody plays it well, and it's well directed. The thing that caught me, and we were talking about this off mic, is that this is one of those movies that um, Spielberg tries to emulate another director instead of being himself. And he's trying in this one, it feels like, to be Alan J. Pakula, who directed All the President's Men, which this basically butts right up against. Like, the ending of this is the beginning of that.
Right.
And I think he did that on purpose to kind of make it two of a piece, but at the same time, he kind of sacrificed a lot of his own style.
He has a talent for in his historical dramas for finding a small, tiny corner
Hmm.
of a much larger event. He did that in Schindler's List.
Hmm.
He did that in Saving Private Ryan. Um, he's able to find the most an interesting avenue that we haven't really explored. Here, he hasn't done that because
No.
he's trying to deal with a story that anybody who goes to see this movie will already know about.
Right.
It is about how what happened when Daniel Ellsberg, military analyst, became disillusioned with which by the way, this scene is really mishandled at the beginning of the film.
Hmm.
Um, discovered that there was the United States government had a buildup to the Vietnam War that was disturbing, and it goes all the way back to the Truman administration. Well, he stole the documents. He was working at the Rand Corporation, and he walked out with them,
Hmm.
and he leaked all of that information to the New York Times, and the New York Times ran it, and they got in a lot of trouble for it. And the movie deals with the moral implications of is the Washington Post going to be able to run this story? Um, is it important? You know, or is it worth risking? Because the questions of is it essential? It's essential to a democracy that the American people know what their government is doing.
Right, and that the Fourth Estate is free to report and keep and hold accountable those in power. It's a very timely movie. It's
Yeah, the era of
it's
fake news.
right, quote unquote,
Yeah,
um, and actual. Um, but the there was just something missing from it that, and again, it was good. I watched half of it a second time. I watched the whole thing once, and I'm maybe about halfway through it a second time just to see if I could get kind of more worked up over it. And I think it's a very good movie. It's well constructed. It just I kept looking for Spielberg, and
Kept looking for a turn.
yeah, I kept looking for that turn, uh, like in you know Munich or
Yeah,
even Minority Report or something that just turned it from information to human story, which is what he deals with better. He deals with human stories better than he deals with a plot. And
you're also looking for some reason for Spielberg to want to have made it.
yeah, other than just it's timely,
Yeah.
which is not usually his thing.
Um, I want to talk about two performances here that are a little bit of a question mark. Meryl Streep plays Katharine Graham, who owned the Washington Post at the time,
Hmm.
in probably the most ordinary performance she's ever given,
Yeah,
but yet got her 21st Oscar nomination for this.
it's because she was in a movie. I'm pretty sure that they nominate her when she doesn't have anything in it.
It's just there's a city ordinance, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
There's nothing extraordinary about it. She does fine. She does
I
great.
I liked Tom Hanks's performance more than.
There's another problem I have because Tom Hanks is playing Ben Bradley,
Hmm.
and if you know Ben Bradley, you know the late Ben Bradley. You know that he had a gravelly voice,
Hmm.
and Tom Hanks is trying to emulate that.
It doesn't quite work.
It's distracting.
Yeah.
It's extremely. It's like okay, just you can play Ben Bradley without being Ben Bradley. I know Tom Hanks, and when I know his voice, and when I'm listening to him, I'm hearing him affect an act that affect. It just
Right.
bothers me.
It's like when you're watching Snowden and
Oh God, I was just thinking of that.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt tries to sound like Edward Snowden and he completely changes his voice. It's like that's very distracting because I know what Joseph Gordon-Levitt sounds like, and it's
Right.
not that. And then you focus on what he's doing with his voice instead of what he's saying and whatever else he's doing, and it takes away from a movie that's, well, that was problematic and questionable at best anyway. But uh, it's the same thing. Like I get where you're going. Like you can tell that he's trying to affect something instead of relaxing into something.
If you really want to see this story, there's a documentary called "The Most Dangerous Man in America,"
Hmm.
which really tries to get you to understand what Daniel Ellsberg was trying to do, and he tells his own story. And while I'm watching this, I'm thinking to myself, there's nothing in this movie that documentary didn't tell me
Hmm.
better
Yeah.
because it tells you the events and it allows Ellsberg to explain himself. Ellsberg is barely in this movie. He's played by Michael Reeves.
Hmm.
He's barely in this movie. This movie is about those in power at the Washington Post and at the New York Times. And I'm thinking, okay, he's the essential element here. Let him tell his story. And that always bugged me. I don't know.
Yeah. I
It's a
think
fine
this
film.
was. I think this was more. This was less about the Pentagon Papers and more about what the publication of them represented,
Right.
both in terms as a threat to, uh, yeah, I guess it's a threat to national security, but it's more a threat to the face of the government
Right.
over four presidents, and
Particularly, and at the moment, it's the Nixon administration.
right, right. So it's more about saving face, and it's more about the impediment of the First Amendment, and uh, the White House trying to block material from being published when, it's, yeah, they were top secret documents that were leaked, but should they have been? I mean, it proves that the government knew that they were going to lose Vietnam, but they stayed in it so that they didn't face the first American war defeat.
Right.
I mean, it's all, and it's, again, I think Spielberg was gravitated to it because it was so timely, because of all the newspapers and media outlets that aren't saying what the current White House wants them to say gets shut down, saying that, oh, there's fake news, and they try to curtail and form their own narrative and not let facts or whatever get published, and they want to go after the leakers and not address what the actual leaks were, and that was how Nixon dealt with it, and we
Right.
all know what happened to Nixon.
Yeah, the whole movie seems the ending of the movie suggests that the whole thing with the Pentagon Papers was a dress rehearsal for Watergate
Mm-hmm.
because it leads right into that.
Yeah,
That's where the movie ends with the break-in.
yeah. It ends with the basically a recreation of the opening shot of All the President's Men.
Right. It's
It's
good,
good. It's good.
but
It's
I expect
entertaining.
I
Yeah,
expect a lot more from Spielberg.
yeah, yeah.
Um, which leads into I don't know exactly how you could possibly lead into this. Um, the most goofball, weirdo movie, and I'm saying that in a category that includes Get Out, to a movie that, given its director, you possibly could not expect anything else. It is The Shape of Water.
I love this movie. This was my favorite movie of the year. Guillermo. Guillermo del Toro. Uh, you're not his biggest fan. I am a huge
Oh my
fan.
god, I like him when his films are personal,
Yeah, I
like
mean,
this.
yeah, like this is just this is a beautiful story. I mean, it's brutal. Like it's a fairy tale, but it's like Pan's Labyrinth and The Devil's Backbone, where it's a fairy tale, but it's very gruesome.
It's a fairy tale that
Uh,
you expect from Guillermo del
from
Toro.
Guillermo del Toro, it's very gothic horror themed, but also very tender. And the worst part is not uh, Michael Shannon losing his fingers, but it's the poor cat.
You know, I was gonna say that. I told people when I saw the movie, I said, "There's a cat that gets eaten in this. You need to know that before you see it."
I didn't
There's
know
a
it
lot of
going in.
death in this movie. There's a lot of death in this movie and a lot of blood. But I think thing that people will be the most weirded out by is the
Hmm.
cat.
Yeah, yeah. That was sad. But the uh, Sally Hawkins
Oh,
and
I love Sally Hawkins.
she's remarkable in the, and it's a hard R right at the beginning of the movie when she's getting ready for work. She's a mute, and she starts her day with coffee, toast, and a bath where she rubs one out and
Yeah,
goes goes about her day. Uh,
and Sally is not shy
no,
at all in any way. Um,
but yeah,
if you
it's
know what this director has, if you know what this director does, you know he is basically fearless.
oh yeah. I mean, this is coming from the man who did Crimson Peak and the two Hellboy movies, the Devil's Backbone, Pan's Labyrinth, Cronus. Uh,
I
it,
think I think Pacific Rim may be the most standard movie he ever directed.
probably, and it's not really a standard movie.
No, no,
uh, and the two Hellboy movies he made were probably are two of the best comic book adaptation
Yeah,
movies
yeah.
ever made. Um,
The story basically is she works in where is it? She works. She works in the government laboratory.
eh, right. It's a I think it's a Navy facility.
Yeah, and this is in the 1960s, and she's basically works as a maid. She and her friend.
She's in the yeah, she works in the custodial
Sanitation.
department.
And she and her friend Octavia Spencer,
Who is
who does
wonderful in this.
a lot of talking for her.
Yes.
Um, she they work there, and they are schooled at minding their business.
Mhm.
When you work for, but because that's the way it is. When you work for a government facility, you are schooled at keeping your eye on the ball. Just keep your eye on your job. Don't worry about anything else.
Mhm.
But Sally Hawkins begins to notice something that's disturbing her. There's this canister that's being pushed around,
Mhm.
and I don't know how much of this we want to give away because everybody pretty much knows already. Um, they're essentially keeping this creature, basically who
Who is
looks like.
the creature from the Black Lagoon?
Thank you.
Yeah. It's
If he were parented by tropical fish,
right. Right.
played by a wonderful actor named Doug Jones
Yes, who you will know as the what he played the faun in Pan's Labyrinth. He
and Abe
played
Sapien.
Abe Sapien, and he is currently playing Commander Saru on Star Trek Discovery.
Yeah. Um,
He's a
he's a
very tall man.
very tall, very skinny, a physical actor, a
Yeah.
beautiful looking creature.
Mm-hmm.
But this ain't ET.
No. No.
And let's just say when they meet, a friendship develops,
There
and then a love
there's a
story.
sensitivity because she's probably the first human he encounters that treats him like the sentient being that he is.
Hmm.
He's self-aware,
Yes,
and they are treating him like an animal, but he's not. He seems to be
treating him like a dangerous animal.
right, and he's really just he's a step to the left of our evolutionary progression, um, where we grew legs and came out of the ocean. He grew legs and stayed in the ocean.
Right.
Uh, so and while I was watching this, I was like, boy, this kind of feels like Abe Sapien's origin story.
Yeah. Or Abe Sapien 1,000 years, like before his evolution or whatever.
You're right, right, right. Or yeah, his ancestor or something. It's such a beautiful story, and the way that Hawkins plays a mute character, she's so expressive, and uh, she never utters a word, but she's very verbal with her hands, and her neighbor is wonderful.
Yeah,
Richard Jenkins
Richard Jenkins. He's
plays
the one that owns the cat.
yeah, he's an artist. He's gay when that was just shy of being illegal over here.
Yeah,
Was still illegal in England. Um,
can get you institutionalized. This
yeah.
is the current Kennedy administration.
Hmm. So he's very sympathetic to her. He's her best friend. They kind of take care of each other. They share a wall, um, and their apartment is over a movie theater,
Mm-hmm.
which is would be like my ideal
It's heaven.
apartment
Just say it is heaven.
space. Especially if because you're paying rent to the guy that owns the theater, he includes that you can go down into the theater whenever you want because he doesn't get a lot of patrons. So
The movie has a lot of shades of ET.
mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot, including the it. It's Shades of ET if the Peter Coyote character were a murdering bastard, because the
Yeah, oh
character that
man,
is
Michael Shannon.
that chases is played by Michael Shannon as the most vile, kind of mean spirited, guy that couldn't be played by anybody else.
No, I couldn't imagine. And he's the kind of actor like you would not imagine him being able to be this kind of evil.
Yeah,
And this is the guy that played the rebooted version of Zod. I mean, this character is way more
this is what Zod should have been.
right. this is
They didn't have the nerve to make Zod this evil.
this is intense. He
They
there's so
there's a
much to
scene.
talk about, but we can't talk about most of it because there's
Yeah,
it's so beautiful to watch it unravel and go in, uh, not knowing very much about it. It's it's a beautiful movie.
it's a beautiful film. It's a disturbing film.
Hmm hmm
If you're used to, American tentpole movies. But if you know Del Toro's work, you're not surprised by any of this.
No, no, no,
If
no.
this is the first movie you've seen by him, God help you.
This is gonna be a little surprising.
I'll just say it's a love story, and yes, it goes that way. But
Yes.
it's a strange film. Let me put it this way. Let me tell you what happened to me. Doug and I are members of the online film critic society. Okay. At the end of the year, they send us screeners because we have our own awards.
Hmm
This was the first screener I got, and ended up being the first screener I watched. So I thought to myself when this movie was over, if this is an indication of the rest of this season, God help us, because I can't imagine anything else being this weird, this fantastic, and this brilliant.
Yeah.
Everything else just has to be a step down. Now there was a movie that I liked a little better than this, that was not nominated for anything, but I'm going to talk about that in another time. But I really did like this movie.
It was fantastic. This is
It's not affectionate in the way you expect.
no, and it's still holding my heart as my favorite movie of the year. And since Del Toro won the Directors Guild uh, Association award, that's lining him up to either grab his first Oscar or The Shape of Water to win Best Picture, or maybe both.
I think this may win Best Picture. Um,
I would not be disappointed in that,
if
like
it
at all.
doesn't, if it doesn't win Best Picture, it will definitely be the next film, which is the last film we're going to talk about, which is called Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri.
Now, see, this movie's getting a lot of flack from film people on Twitter, especially online. Um, I I loved it.
I did too.
I thought it was hilarious, but also incredibly sad and touching and um, there.
Unexpected.
Yeah, very unexpected. Martin McDonagh, who previously wrote and directed In
In Bruges.
Bruges, he doesn't do a lot of pictures. He's a playwright mostly, an Irish playwright. But
I was very surprised. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
no,
you.
no, no, go ahead.
I was very surprised, in our little community, in our online film critics society, and even in the larger critical community, just how divided this film is.
Yeah, yeah,
There are those who call it brilliant, those who call it a meditation on violence, and then there are those who just call it cold and nihilistic. It
and
is all of those
racist,
things.
and racist. They call it
and racist.
racist too.
It is all of those things.
It is. It is all of those things. Um, the Frances McDormand is so wonderful here because she is playing probably her frankest character in years, and if she wins the Oscar, I wouldn't be upset. I kind of want Charisse Ronan or Margot Robbie to come away with it with I, Tonya, which I still don't understand why that wasn't nominated for Best Picture because that was a stunning. I loved I, Tonya, but uh, everybody in this cast, from Frances McDormand to Sam Rockwell to Woody Harrelson to Peter Dinklage shows up. Uh, Everybody's really wonder, and the kid from Manchester by the Sea that I
Right.
don't remember his name that got nominated for that.
Lucas
Lucas
Hedges
Lucas Hedges. Uh,
was in Lady Bird.
yes, yes, he was. Um, they're all so very good in this, telling the story of a grieving mother whose daughter was raped, murdered, and then
Raped while she was dying.
raped while she was dying, and then set on fire
Mm.
and charred. And she sets out. She buys time on these three billboards to indict the police chief, but the police department for not finding who did this to her daughter. What is it? A year later, 6 months later, and it's her heartbreak, but she McDormand approaches it like she did Fargo, with like,
Very matter of fact.
yeah, very matter of fact, but kind of tongue in cheek. She's quick with a witticism, but she's also quick with remember I'm heartbroken or I understand what you are going through. She plays this like nobody else could.
She's furious, angry, upset, but she has quiet. She's aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
She's also violent. But there are moments in the movie when you can see that her heart is irreparably broken.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's there. She sets up these three billboards outside of town that calls out this Chief Willoughby, played by Woody Harrelson, as to why there have been no leads in this case.
His character takes a few turns and directions that I was not anticipating.
Everybody takes turns
Yeah.
that they don't expect.
Like,
But she calls them out, and it's not what you expect.
right. They have a very tender relationship. Um, Friendship, really. But when he says to her, that like don't you think this is a little unfair? And she's like, well, you're the one in charge. Like, if it were somebody else, their name would be up there. It's like instead of whole police department making it personal would spur some action is her hope. And yeah, I think this has a shot, but again, it's up against not having a Best Director nomination, and Oscar punditry it's like we said with at the beginning of the show with Call Me by Your Name, uh, without that Best Director nomination,
Right.
uh, it's harder for a movie to win Best Picture. Um, like we said,
This
Argo,
movie,
Grand Hotel, and maybe Driving Miss Daisy.
but this movie is not at all in the same place when it's over that it was when it started.
Oh no,
It
not
travels
yeah.
so far, but stays in this little community.
Mm-hmm.
And the characters travel no more, absolutely, Nobody travels further than this little police officer,
Mm-hmm.
played in a difficult but brilliant performance by Sam Rockwell,
Mm-hmm.
who comes in this movie as the most immature mama's boy,
Yeah.
jerk in every sense of the word. He's almost like a schoolyard bully.
Mm-hmm.
And as he gets into this case, and as things begin to happen, there is a measure of maturity that works its way into his being. He is almost always at odds with the Francis McDormand character.
Yeah.
But there comes a moment, um, I'll give this away. He loses his job at one point. Um, and he gets a piece of information that sets him on a mission. And it leads to an ending that I almost wanted to applaud.
Yeah, you know what? I this is where a lot of people are throwing their criticism
Mm-hmm.
because it's the redemption of the racist character without him really
Extremely unlikable
apologizing.
character.
Yeah, without him apologizing for his racism. But he does make that decision with a conversation with his mother to just kind of stop with that poisonous way of thinking. That's what leads him to this ending. And I think that if you're not really looking for it, you're not going to notice that he's turning away from that mindset. So, and it would be easy to then say, yes, the movie kind of does not deal with the racism that it brings up, and there's a few um, regrettably casual utterings of the N word. Um,
But
although
it's organic to the story. It's not.
it is, and there's so much going on with it that yes, that could be a point of criticism, and I understand where people are going with it, and I also understand why people, Josh Larson, who is also in the Online Film Critics Society, but he's a co-host on Film Spotting, a great movie podcast, and writes his own reviews. Gave it 1.5 out of 4 stars and called it a tonal disaster because it's blending comedy with tragedy, with violence and revenge. With there's a lot of notes going on, and I can see how that could be offsetting. I don't think this movie is for everyone, but I loved it. I
The
had a
way
very
I
strong, good
the way
reaction
I
to it.
saw it was this action that the Francis McDormand character takes of setting up these three billboards to call out this sheriff or chief, or police chief, better, by the way,
Mm-hmm,
has an extreme trickle down effect on every single character in this movie
mm-hmm.
in their own way,
Right.
and not in any way that you expect. Um, there's consequences to everything that happens because of this.
Mm-hmm.
Even right up to the end, there are still consequences that are happening. And it's all, trying not to give this away, it's all cause and effect. Movies don't generally have cause and effect. We have a three-act structure. We don't see the results of certain things, especially violence,
Right.
because violence in movies is generally so casual.
Mm-hmm.
There's a response and what's the word I'm looking for? There's a response to everything that happens in this movie. and nothing is left untouched. So that by the end, you get the feeling, and it has a very life goes on ending, by the way.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, for those two anyway.
for those two, anyway. There the consequences. There's
Right.
consequences for everything that happens in this movie, but they're never what you expect. And I was so firmly wrapped up in this movie. I always use this phrase. I had my feet in this movie for 2 hours. I was spellbound by everything that was happening. It reminded me a great deal of Fargo in that
Yeah, oh yeah, it's very engaging.
this one action spurs a lot of other action,
Mm-hmm.
and it's fascinating to watch.
Yeah. It's the
It's also
is
extremely violent too.
it is it's the windshield effect where one little notch starts this little spider web crack and it just spreads out
We're
from
struggling
there.
not to give this away.
It's very hard because this is a movie that really probably deserves to be gone into in depth. Um, but we don't have the time, nor is this is a spoiler free episode, quite unlike every other episode we've ever had of
Yeah,
everything.
we're trying to be accommodating because you can talk about it without giving away too
Yeah.
much.
So
It's a struggle, but it happens.
yeah, that's our take, or
Okay,
our recap
so I'm
of
going to
the
ask you a question, Doug.
yeah
I'm going
yeah.
to ask you a question. Which of these nine films, if you had to nail it down, if you're a betting man,
Hmm.
you put your money on any of these nine films. What do you think is going to be the winner on March 4th?
Shape of Water.
Okay, I'm going to say Three Billboards. I could be wrong. I
Yeah.
probably am, but I'm going to say three. If
I
I had to guess, I'm going to say Three Billboards.
the tea leaves are going in uh, Shape of Water or um, now I
Because I
can't
don't
think of
see
the
any of
other
the
one.
other films really winning.
Yeah, I think I think it might be down to these two. It, like I said, Get Out might end up being an outside chance that if these two split the vote, that could come up in between and be a real surprise winner.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, which I would also not be all that displeased with.
I would only be disappointed if they gave the award to the Post, but
Oh yeah, well
anything
yeah.
else, I'd be okay with it.
Yeah, I think it's a good crop this year. Um, I still don't.
Diverse crop.
Yeah, I still don't understand why there's only nine when there's at least five or six other movies that could have filled that last slot. Um, but uh, you
If
know,
I
the
had, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting.
good.
If I had my choice, my brothers, and I was able to be the guy who put the 10th film in there, it would be my favorite film of the year, which is A Ghost Story.
Mm,
Um, Probably, in my mind, the most original, the most difficult, the most the most mind-boggling movie I saw last year, and only because I'm still thinking about it, and I saw it in August. That would
I
be my number 10.
I think I saw that in October. I liked it. I wasn't as captivated by it as you were. I would have a hard time narrowing down the 10th spot. It's like I said, there's quite a number um, that I would put in. Uh, I Tonya immediately springs to mind.
Oh, I Tanya's great.
That was just that was a heck of a ride. I enjoyed every minute of that one. Um, but I don't really know. That would probably be it. That would probably be it because anything else that I thought should be there is there. Um, like, uh, I don't know that I would have put the post Darkest Hour in Dunkirk up. I'm happy that Christopher Nolan has his Best Director nomination for
Yeah.
Dunkirk. Because it is a directed movie. I don't know if it's Best Picture material, but it's definitely Best Director material, if that makes any sense. Uh,
I think it makes an interesting historical point that both of those films are nominated and they tell the same story from two different sides.
yeah,
It's
right.
an interesting historical point.
Unlike when in for 1998 when Saving Private Ryan and The Thin Red Line were nominated,
Yeah,
they're telling different stories, but they're both about World War II, and they're they're not interchangeable, but it would be easy to forget that one scene was in one and not the other.
right.
Um,
Well, I mean, and one takes place in Europe and the other's in the Pacific Theater.
sure, yeah. I mean, it doesn't look the same aesthetically, but you could transpose scenes. You know, them stalking through France could easily be uh, green screened over, and they could be in Guadalcanal
Yeah,
going through the jungle. Like it's not radically different. Tonally, it is because Terrence Malick is well, Terrence Malick.
yeah.
Um,
I like Terrence Malick.
so do I. But I think that about wraps it up for us. As we mentioned, you can find us on Twitter at pod
Odd underscore Bay.
underscore bay. Yeah, that was the word I was looking for. Underscore pod underscore bay. You can find all of our back episodes at www.thepodbaydoorspodcast.wordpress.com. You can find all of Jerry's writings at armchaircinema.com, armchairoscars.com, and overthinkingoscars.wordpress.com, and at armchaircma. Jerry has something else to say.
I would also like to tell you, if you are listening to this on the day that this drops, I will be covering all of the films that we've talked about um, from now until the Oscars on March 4th
Mm-hmm.
on my blog,
Yeah.
overthinkingoscar.com.
Mm-hmm. And which it's a fun read, tracking the history of the Best Picture Oscar, uh, from Wings to Moonlight to whatever wins March 4th.
Whatever wins.
And you can find my stuff at talkmovietome.com. I'm Doug Heller. You can find me on Twitter at talkmovietome1. We appreciate you tuning in for our special episode on the Best Picture nominees for the year of 2017 to be awarded in 2018.
That's confusing.
Thanks so much for listening, and the pod bay doors are now closed.
The mission has been completed.
Hollywood Hotel. Good evening. Just a moment, I'll connect you.
That's gooey ballyhooly Hollywood, where any office boy or young mechanic can be a panic with just a good-looking pan.
And any shop girl can be a top girl if she pleases the tired businessman.
Hooray for Hollywood! You may be homely in your neighborhood.
To be an actor, see Mr. Factor, you make your kisser look good.
Go out and try your luck, you may be Donald Duck. Hooray for Hollywood! Hooray for Hollywood! Hey, Benny!
Hi, Ronnie. Come on, fellas, here he is.
Hooray for Hollywood! That woolly, white and woolly Hollywood!
They hire cowboys and they hang their chaps up and all their maps up and give them all that they lack. Now ain't it funny? They pay them money. Shows what you can do if your horse can act.
Hooray for Hollywood! They hire fellas whose physiques are good. And then they tell them they're the perfect shape men to act like ape men. And they convince them they should. They make them grunt and yell, oh, 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 oh. And people think they're swell, oh, 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 oh. Hooray for Hollywood! It's really got me hooked.